Okay, what I am going to cover in this video is how to take a character or a drawing and go from a drawing and a frame-by-frame animation sort of approach to a bones and deformation based approach, more of a rigging sort of approach that gives you the ability to add a lot of action and sort of like full Disney style animation, if you will. This is the drawing I started with, more or less. It's been modified a little bit, but so I thought, okay, and by the way, on the project that I'm working on, what I'm about to show is something that I would not want to do very often because it actually breaks the anime aesthetic. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so she's whatever she's saying. Obviously, she doesn't have a mouth, but you've got this transformation of her head with deformation of her face, plus the ponytail follows along. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show how to take it even a step further so that the body moves and deforms as well. But the interesting thing about it to me is you started with just a simple drawing. So this is actually the drawing that I started with. So I'm going to review a couple steps that I took to get to where I am right now, and then I'll go ahead and carry it through and get the rest of her body involved. But basically all I had to do was take the drawing and cut it into pieces. So I took her body, her head, and her ponytail and split it all into levels, and then just kind of cleaned up the edges and stuff. It's not there's more that could be done because obviously this ponytail should really extend lower. I mean, let's go ahead and do that right now real quick. I'm just going to take this brush, hit the B key, and then I'm going to use the R key to sample. And this is actually one of the cool things about this technique is once you sort of break your character up into pieces, you can make these sorts of modifications that give the rig a little more flexibility. Why am I even bothering with this type of thing? Well, I think that there are animation tools out there like Dragon Bones and Creature that are making it easier and easier to create character animations, usually sort of a game sprite type style. It's normally 2D type stuff. But the thing is that the technologies that are being programmed very well by the developers of those applications in some ways are leapfrogging more established and seemingly mature programs, you know, like OpenToonz and Blender and stuff like that. Sometimes because the capabilities are better, but really more often because it's creating a user interface that makes it the cost of entry is lower, you know, to beginners or whatever. But the thing that really got me thinking about it is the fact that I think in the modern media space, if you're going to develop an anime property, it's not a bad idea to think about how that property or that story or that cartoon is going to expand into a greater transmedia space, which you know involves things like games and, you know, social interactions of various kinds, you know, whatever that means, you know. So anyway, it's not a bad idea to verse yourself on the technologies that are out there, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little cleanup here, and then we'll get around to really fixing it up to the next level. Now, in this case, I have to make the changes in the drawing itself because once you apply the plastic tool to a level, you can no longer edit the drawings in the X sheet. It's fortunate that OpenToonz provides you with sort of a back door to that, which is the ability to just edit the drawing that the plastic tool is modifying. So, no problema. I'll just tweaky and then turn these guys back on. Okay, so that gives us a starting point, and obviously you can be as picky as you want. If you really hone in here, you can see little areas that are Not quite perfect in terms of how things are joined together. But again, the cool thing is all I did was take one drawing and just slice it into pieces, and all of a sudden I've got this sort of motion comic type thing going on. Okay, so let's look at two things. Number one, how did this get set up and rigged? And number two, how do you take it to the next level where this entire thing that's already animated is now joined to her body, which is also animated, and controlled by her body, because obviously if her body moves, her head better darn well go with it. Well, here are the steps. I'm going to take these guys and turn them off. The first thing I did was just use the plastic tool. So you just take your drawing and hit the X key, and when you hit the X key, you have the ability to create a mesh, which I did. And once you've created the mesh, then generally the next step is to create a bone structure to deform that mesh with. So let's go here. And by the way, there's this concept called paint rigid, which gives you the ability to, by painting these vertices, you're essentially telling OpenToonz that you don't want these vertices to be deformed basically under any circumstances. But having said that, I will say that the deformation algorithm, in other words, the way that OpenToonz uses bones to deform, is not the most well-conceived algorithm I've ever seen. Okay, so in other words, you will find that sometimes it's pretty good, and sometimes it's not. But a good rule to follow is, when in doubt, use more bones rather than fewer bones. Okay, because it seems to, so you can see what I mean, you would think all I would need is maybe one or two nodes here. Like here's the anchor, the root of it, but then you might have a neck, maybe a chin node, and then a top of her head, and you would think the program would intelligently sort of figure out how to divide the influence of those bones. And it does do a pretty good job, but it's not like amazing. So you can use the fact that the bones use, you can use the fact that the bones are attached to one another the way they are and work closer to the root to give yourself more control. Meaning, 1, 2, 3, there's actually four bones here. And I did that because I know that if I move this one, these are going to deform these areas and behave a little more predictably than it would if I only had this one bone stuck in the middle here. Okay, controlling the whole top part of her head. So you just kind of learn what to do in terms of how many bones to use and this sort of thing, depending on what you're working with rig-wise. Okay, so I wanted to give myself the ability to sort of deform the chin and create a lip sync type effect, and also have a little bit of squash and stretch going on with her head. It works pretty well. Okay, so the way you actually get into animating that is by switching the plastic tool to animate mode. Should be pretty straightforward. Now the part that I think probably a lot of OpenToonz users out there don't know is, how do you connect this rig to, how do you connect other parts of your puppet animation to the plastic tool rig? And that's a very important thing to know how to do, because in this case we've got the ponytail, and when the bones move, we want the ponytail to follow them. Well, how do you do that? Well, what you do is, I hit F3, by the way, to open the schematic. You can also do that with Windows schematic. Okay, in OpenToonz, and you want to make sure you're in the stage schematic. There are two versions of the schematic. The default is the stage schematic, and if you click this little button down here, it switches you to the FX schematic that lets you put in any one of 100 zillion different post-productions effects, like glows and color corrections and all the rest. You want to be in the stage schematic. So here's the deal. What happens is, when you use the plastic tool, a a level is created, which is this one. That's why you can see it's purple here, okay? And then the level that you're deforming, which I'm going to just go ahead and call that head, okay, so there it is, just plugs into the plastic tool, which then plugs into the table, and that's what becomes your output, okay? That's pretty straightforward. What is definitely not straightforward is this next part. What if, did I just say what? I meant to say what. What if you have another part of your drawing that you want to animate, but you don't necessarily want it to fall under the plastic tool deformation? What you do is, and by the way, I'm going to plug this in here so you can kind of see what happens. If I just plug the ponytail straight into the output, then it goes where it goes, and it's not where it was in the original drawing because I already moved it with the Animate tool in order to position it properly for what I'm about to do, which is you take the output from this other element of your puppet and you plug it into another one of your outputs of the plastic tool. Now you can see that it disappeared, and the reason it disappeared is that right now it's connected to the wrong bone. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the X key so that you can see the skeleton. Look at these labels. You have vertex number 4, vertex number 3. They're all given names. Okay, so the root is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, if I take the ponytail, plug it into one of these other outputs, which obviously, as you can see, magically created another input to the mesh or the plastic tool. Okay, if you put your mouse over this and now just go up to 5, just drag until it gets to 5. Now that level is parented to that node right there. Okay. Now, when you do that, it's going to jump around as it's being parented to each of the nodes. So what you normally want to do is go to your very first frame, hit the A key for the Animate tool, and create some basic settings for the level that you're parenting to the bone. Normally that means tell it where its center should be, because we want its center to sort of be in the same location as the node itself. And then oftentimes, you know, maybe this was over here and I need to get it positioned back to where it needs to be, because every time you parent that level to one of those bone nodes, that level gets jerked around, right? So you want to set up the initial positioning properly. In my case, what I did here was I not only did that, but as the little bone animation played out, I also went ahead and used the Animate tool, as you can see these keyframes here, to sort of rotate and actually let me put this on steroids for you. So if her head goes back to here, okay, theoretically we would want the ponytail to go like this, but there would be sort of a reaction here. So it'd be something like this, okay, and then it would settle, and that might take a little bit longer. So let's hit the L key and see if that works. Okay, so that's not amazing, but it's not bad. All right, now if we turn her body on, okay, so the only thing I take objection to with it right now would be the fact that her head, you know, I want to get the body involved. So now this is where the whole rig begins to get more complicated, but it's kind of cool what we can do. I'm going to go to the body and I'm going to do the plastic tool again because I want it to be deformed as well. So I'm just going to hit the X key and I'm going to create a mesh. And for some reason the mesh tool only seems to be detecting one little tiny glitch in the drawing. So just to be checking my work here, I'm gonna look at what we have going on. Okay, not sure what happened there, but I'm gonna try this again. let's hit the create mesh. Oh, there it is. I see what's going on. I was just zoomed in too far. Okay, and you can actually have a very dense mesh if you want lots of control over the deformation. What I find is when in doubt, you lose performance when the mesh is really, really dense. So, and I tend to think that the deformation and the performance sweet spot seems to be somewhere here in the middle. So I just usually keep the mesh on the less dense side. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build a skeleton for the body. I'm going to give it a root. I'm just going to put the root out here somewhere where I sort of have control over it. And then I'm thinking in terms of how I want this to rotate. I'm actually going to put the root there, but then I'm going to give it kind of a second root. And then I want the body to be able to bend a little bit. So what I'm going to do is say this is the basic skeleton, and I can test it. I can test it like this. And you can see some wacky things that happen here when I move these bones around. So I'm going to go back to the build skeleton mode, and just to be safe, I'm going to create some extra nodes to just keep that mesh under control, you might say. Okay, and I don't always get it right on the first guess, but I think, yeah, okay, so that moves everything, which is really what I did want. And then that pretty much gives me control over this part, of which I can always go out to these further bones and compensate a little bit. And I have this a little bit of motion here that's possible. Okay, there's one thing missing though, and that is that I really want to have a node that's literally for the sole purpose of providing a home for the head and neck. And in this case, that's vertex 13. Okay, I'm ready to go. Now what I'm going to do, I shouldn't even have to look at anything. I should be able to just go right in here and make this happen. I'm going to call this, I'm going to change the name of it to body mesh. Yeah. Okay, just so I can see it in here. Okay, and what I want to do is, I said that it was number 13. Okay, so I think all I have to do is connect this to number 13. Okay, and then once again, I'm going to use the animate tool to make an adjustment. So A key, and as you can see, there is definitely an issue with the center point. I'm going to move this to here and trust that it's kind of sort of close. And so you can see what I did was I parented this, and I parented one entire rig to another rig. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hit the X key and go into animate mode. Make sure the sucker's turned on, and now the head can move around like this. And let's go ahead and make some adjustments. Okay, the adjustment's going to be, okay, and by the way, okay, so there will be some compensation in the head and neck rig called for. But basically what I wanted to do is go like this. We're going to ignore, by the way, the fact that this bleeds off the page. You know, for demonstration purposes, I'm kind of thinking, who cares? If I want to, I can click this little button that says keep distance, and now the bones will stretch. So I can actually compensate this way if I want to. Okay, so let's just kind of feel this. As you can see, we can move the whole rig around. All right, and okay, so now what I'm going to do is go over to this one, and I just want to get this positioned properly. Okay, It's amazing how quickly you can get really interesting results. And now what I'm going to do is also turn the ponytail back on, and let's see what we got. Okay, let's go ahead and put it in render mode so that we kind of get the undistracted view, if you will. Now you can see again that okay, so for me there's plenty to criticize about this animation, definitely. I don't like the flowy nature of the body, but at the same time, for demonstration purposes, we're not really overly concerned about making everything top shelf perfect. But let's play with it a bit. I mean, isn't that interesting? You could criticize the fact that the bone tool, when you parent levels to nodes, that they don't inherit rotation, as you can see. It just changes the position. But what I've found is usually that's actually a good thing. You want to have the ability to manually get in there and touch up the translations. Okay, so now I'm going to take this. So you can see the problem we have here. I can fix that, though. I'm going to show you in a minute how to fix that. Okay. Okay. Now, this is going to be a little tricky, but what we're going to do is we're going to go into build skeleton mode, and let's turn the head back off so we can kind of see what we're doing here. Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. I turned that on. Okay, let's turn everything off so we can see what we've got. X key, and there's my skeleton, and the problem is that this vertex that's the parent for the head needs to be off of the mesh. Because it was here, it's over one of the green lines of the mesh, and so as a result it's deforming it, which I really didn't want to do. It needs to be there. And now we'll go back into animate mode and see if that... Okay, now we're probably going to have to reposition the initial position of the head mesh, and that's okay. We just hit the A key and we're on the first frame, so that's good. So let's go like that, and you can see that the animation, and by the way, this is one of the things that you want to be aware of that can begin to backfire a bit, is you want to work out from the broadest animation to the narrowest, because what we have going on here that's a little distracting is the fact that there was already animation baked into the head. So now the animation of the body is they're being added together, and now you find out that the head actually has way too much motion going on. That's a common problem to have. And it comes from getting a little too eager and doing too much animation at a small level, and then, you know, once you connect that to something that's broader, things are moving around too much. So what do we do about that? Well, I'm going to hit the X key, and I'm just going to look, yeah, right there. So that keyframe right there is the problem, and I guess we probably want to do it like that. Alright. Okay. This is not working at all, so let's just delete it. Okay. And then I do want to actually do a little bit more there. And then let's go 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Do this on 4s, so to speak. So I'm just basically baking a little bit of lip sync action into it. Alright. And so now we want to set up our preview range. Okay, so now it looks like she's jabbering, and obviously got a little bit more animated action going on, all with a single drawing and the animate tool. So to me, it's, you know, it's pretty impressive. You can get some really cool stuff going on. Let me drop this down to 12 frames a second just so you Because if this was timed out, it would probably look better if it was. So look at that. It looks pretty good. And all done with a single drawing. And now the thing about this that's even cooler is, well, I'll show you. Actually, I'm going to make it even cooler right now. I better save this. We'll call this plastic. Let's call it plastic rigging. Just save it, just to be safe. Okay, so now you say, well, yeah, but I'd like her to blink her eyes. Okay, here's what you do. Let's go into the drawing, and we'll fix this baby up in a hurry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do some touch-up here that I think is required. And it may, when we go back to the animation, we're probably going to discover that, you know, the girl needs a neck. Okay, we're going to skip the neck for today. But to do what I'm about to illustrate, I'm just going to grab the B key and change the color here. So, all right, and hit the D key twice. And then here, I'm going to open her mouth a little bit. I don't need to open it wide because remember, when her chin stretches, her mouth's going to stretch too. So, and then in this one, let's do it this way. Let's just erase this by painting over it. And then kind of put that look in there. Okay. So now, let's do some lip sync. So now all I have to do is go here, 1, 2, 3, let's say I'll go 4 frames ahead, and then the Q and the W key jump me between these different drawings. Okay, I actually want that to be 3. And I'm totally making this up as I go along. Okay, yeah, I want this one. Yeah, I want her to really open her mouth wide there, and then close it again. Okay. So now we've combined one simple drawing with bone animation, with a nice rig, and lip sync as well. It's not perfect. I can see right there when she gets stretched a little bit. It's actually a little too stretched. So let's hit the animate tool. I just frankly can't stand it when things are a little bit wacky. So let's go ahead and stretch her a bit here, but let's make this a little less extreme. Okay. So here, here's the value of a rigging-based animation approach. Doing frame by frame is not always the best thing. Now let's go ahead and animate this, give it half a second to render. Look at that. In my opinion, it looks incredible. Now, if I wanted to make it even a little bit better, I'd create another plastic tool rig for the ponytail, and I would have it really, reacting. But the thing is, do we want to take this to the level of a full, 24 frame per second Disney style animation, or do we want to keep the, the anime aesthetic? If we go too far, we lose the. Excuse me, I'm like belching here. We run the risk of losing the more simple, approach that you would get with the anime of which this drawing was taken from. So, as you work on something like this, of course you discover things like this, that need to be cleaned up and fixed. But basically, okay, so it's been almost 30 minutes. If you're into anime or animation and OpenToonz at all, you'll probably get a lot out of this video. It goes to show you that what I've sort of said in a lot of my videos, is sort of peppered here and there, is that whatever you want to do in OpenToonz, you can generally find a way to do it. And that's why I like the program. Is the deeper you dig, the more you find out that it's really very, very capable in fairly intuitive ways. You know, it's one of these things where, as I used the software and I looked at the schematic, I said to myself, you know, it would be cool if it did this, and then you find out that it does do that. So I've commented before that it's like, it feels like software written by animators for animators to get real work done. It's not just for toy silliness. So that's that, and I'm sure there will be more later.